So this is David True. Those of you who have been on these sessions before will probably know me. I've been on several of these. I want to give you credit for joining us on a Saturday because it's not the usual day for these things. But if you were here yesterday, or even if you weren't, we've got some great content, things that can build upon what we talked about yesterday, and new content that we'll add to it. I think a lot of this is a build because the processes we're talking about, AML KYC, are something that we always have to do in any kind of transaction system or any kind of times of transaction. But it's what we learned the other day is, or yesterday, is that the COVID situation that has been imposed upon us, certainly nobody wished for this, and we're still going to be dealing with it for a while, that has made things more complicated. And part of that, depending on the size of your organization, particularly for a large organization, is getting that organization to work. Those challenges were present even before COVID, and they're certainly well, let's see. But I suspect that COVID has accelerated or highlighted some of the challenges that were always present in larger organizations and need to be resolved to make these things move forward in an efficient way. So I need a little housekeeping that I'll say is there are sponsors for this event, and one of them is the company that I'm associated with, Agility Advisors. So if you have payments questions or payments needs, you can always reach out to me. That's something that we've done with folks, most of them are my age, so I think in aggregate we have a million years of experience or something, and that's only 4 people. Then we have KYC 2020, who spoke yesterday and will be speaking, I think, later today. And we have Merlin.ai. The media partners are FinTech Times, the FinTech Power 50, and Financial IT. And the other thing, and this relates directly to Dr. Kevin here. I was going to say Dr. K, but I don't know if that sounds right.
That was good.
Okay, so is a survey that is going on. So for anybody who's participating, who's on board here, and did not take that survey yesterday, please do take that survey. That will be an important way of gathering information about what's going on right now. So as I alluded to a moment ago, or mentioned a moment ago, we are in an odd time that nobody expected, nobody anticipated, nobody planned for, but it's changing the way we do a lot of the things that were already in place and already happening before, and now we're having to do them in a somewhat different way. And if we're part of a larger organization in particular, or an organization of any significant size, the small startup where everybody knows each other, it's tough to change. It's tough to make that transition. And that's what we're going to have in the next conversation. I think a really good conversation about making those changes and how do you do those sorts of things. And so we're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Kevin Mclafferty, who's is an authority, and I'm going to read the bio here, so bear with me for a moment, who's an authority on the development of high-performance organizations. He has deep and broad experience in business management, big data and analytics, organization design, and quality management. He's got 20 plus years experience across industry sectors ranging from global banking and markets to financial services. He's a leading industry professional working with global service organizations to transform their enterprises and trying to get to high performance capabilities. And again, if we've worked in larger organizations, which I think most of us have, we know sometimes the normal process will take 8 or 9 months, and you can't do that. That's not something that's something that's very, very difficult to manage when the external environment is changing so rapidly. So anyway, finally about Kevin, he's received his professional doctorate in business for his work to transform operational efficiency in global commerce. He's an alum of the Said Business School at Oxford and alma mater High Performance Learning. So with that, I think I will just turn it over to Dr. Kevin Mclafferty.
Cheers, guys. And I echo the same thoughts as David. Thanks for joining on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, or indeed a Saturday evening, depending where you are in the world today. And I would also like to thank David personally, as well as Harsh and Vidit, who I've been corresponding with to get us to this point where we actually can deliver this talk and this presentation. So thank you very much to all 3 guys there. Yeah, David, thank you for the intro as well. Before I jump in, yeah, just a bit about what I'm going to talk about here, high performance organizational design, and why that is important, and why that's important not just to banking, but to any organizations, and how we design and build the capabilities that give us high performance, because high performance doesn't happen by chance, and it doesn't happen because you've got the latest and the most modern IT system or production system. These things are carefully designed, and I'm going to give you the philosophical concepts of those designs and how we can connect that to our operations and develop your organization as you move forward. So I've just got a little quote here underneath that. It always seems impossible until it's done, and developing a high performance organization is not something that happens overnight. Okay, it takes years to develop those performance capabilities, and I'm going to show what some of those performance capabilities are. So, as David mentioned there, I'm just going to do a bit of a selfless plug just now. I'm in a research partnership with Professor Nick Rich, and we look at social technical organisations such as banks, such as large global corporates, and we look at their operational efficiency. And that's what we've been doing for the past 12 years. We write papers professionally, academically, and we've got a research partnership under the this brand here, Trident. You might like to know, if you look at the picture there, Professor Nick Rich was asked by Her Majesty the Queen to be the Director and Chief Engineer for the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic medals. So that's his claim to fame as well. I just thought I'd point that one out. And yeah, I'll probably, again, selfishly spam you guys all the link to this survey that we're doing after I do the presentation. But if not, you can see it there. And I think it's in some of the marketing materials that Harsh and it sent out. So jumping in, I think what I'm going to cover today are these 5 points here on the screen. I don't need to, you guys can all read, so I'm not going to cover them in detail, but that is the what I'm going to cover. The why I'm going to cover that is more important. So we need to create organizational resilience, especially in times of COVID and especially in times of volatility as we see just now in the market, economically, as well as socially across the world, okay? What I'm going to talk about is how we do that as well, how we create the fundamental principles upon which a truly high performance organization is built, and how that relates to fin crime, AML, CDD, and KYC operations. But first, before I jump in, you guys have got a job to do today as well, right? I'm not going to go through the mechanics of the fin crime, the AML processes, and tell you best practice. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go up a level. I'm going to give you the principles on which they should be built and should be built to create that high performance organization and that resilience we all need for us, for the bank, and for the client as well. So I'm going to ask you to prepare for some mental abstraction. So when I give a concept or present a concept, you guys have got a job to do, which to join that together. Okay. And then I think within that, we'll just jump straight in. What I'm going to present just now is the way and the underpinning reasons why we develop organizations the way we do. And then I'm going to go and show you how we should develop and design organizations. But it's good to know why we think the way we do. So this guy here, a fellow Scotsman, this statue is just below Edinburgh Castle in Edinburgh. Adam Smith, he was arguably the first guy to produce a book on economics in 1776. You may have read of it. It's called The Wealth of Nations. And in that, he looked at the organization of work and production, yeah, and to look at supply and demand models. And that was the first time anyone had ever looked at work in this way and the economy of economics. What's his goal? His goal was to look at the division of labour and to increase the economic output of production to drive prosperity in society. Now, that's very virtuous, okay? That was 1776, that's 200 and what, near 250 years ago. Fast forward to 1911, we've got this chap here, Frederick Winslow Taylor, yeah? And he published a book called The Principles of Scientific Management. His focus was on the productivity of personnel and machines. So we're coming to the mid part of the Industrial Revolution here. And his method was the analysis and the control of work via quantitative methods, and it's something we still do today. His orientation and goal was the cost optimization of labour and resources, producing our products and service to a managed cost. Yeah. Then we've got Henry Ford. And just so you know, the publication of Frederick Winslow Taylor's book was in 1911, but he had developed a lot of these principles back in like the 1880s, and he heavily inspired Henry Ford's vision. So in 1908, Henry Ford produced and developed the first production line. His focus was on the reduction of skilled trades to repetitive tasks, yeah, to improve the quality and reliability. So we're taking something that was from a skilled tradesman who could build, let's say, an engine from raw materials to an engine, but he compartmentalized that. He put the block of metal on the production line, and somebody drilled a hole, and then somebody put a bolt in, and then somebody put a camshaft in, and that was how the production line started. Nothing new, nothing revolutionary here. Like, I know you guys all know this, but I'm going to move to make my point. His methods was the automation of human activity, and in 1913 he got the first continuous production line. Yeah, and he was looking at the supply and the control of all resources. So one thing that people don't know about Henry Ford, he was the first guy to do end-to-end supply chain management, from resource aggregation, right, which was digging iron ore out of the earth, to a finished car dropping off his production line in 1923 took 3 weeks. So he knew that when that excavator put that bucket into the earth to pull out the iron ore, he knew that way he would turn out a car and put that on a train or a freight and ship that all over America and indeed the world. And it took him 3 weeks. That's how precise he managed his production. And yeah, so his goal was the managed mass production of products coupled with a systemic reduction in the manufacturing costs. If you don't know that the Ford Model T was about, I think it was about $850 when it first launched, and he got that down to under $400, so he halved the price. And he did that. He was able to do that because he had end-to-end control of his supply chain and the production line assembly. So we've looked at the machine age and how work was developed and the pedigree of that work and the intention of designers like yourself who design your organization to do things in a specific way. And you may already be making the mental connections around KYC, CDD, etc., client onboarding. We take a product and service that we need to deliver, and we start to compartmentalize it, and we start to take what would be a massive skill need and hone that down into a specific set of operational tasks. But we're not in the machine age anymore, but we still think that way. So let's have a look at the machine age to the digital age. So prevailing management philosophies. So we're saying here, work and therefore its instructions must be broken down to its elemental parts to control and manage each part as well as possible. And the assumption, right, that each part, if it's managed as well as possible, the whole will perform as well as possible. And as I've put there, that's absolutely false. There's bigger dependabilities that we need to understand and emerge. So the impact, therefore, of mechanistic thinking is dismantling the objective of a service into elements, dehumanizes, yeah, the actual service provision. And then services built on that principle systematically destroys the social organization. Now, what does that mean by that? So let's have a quick look at this graph here. This here is a graph called systems complexity, and we fundamentally need to understand that if we're going to build high performance organizations. So in the bottom corner there, bottom left, we've got low complexity principles here of clockworks and frameworks. That's the first level of a system. And as we go up the hierarchy of complexity, we get control systems, self-regulating systems, i.e. your IT systems that we produce and to manage work, just like Henry Ford's production line. And then we go into biological systems, so complexity is increasing. Yeah, we've got cells, plants, animals, and then we've got us, humans, the most complex animals on the planet. But then we've got level 4 here. So what's level 4? That's social organizations. That's what we work in every day. And the reason why that's the highest complexity is because it's got humans in it. It's got the self-regulating systems, which is your IT systems, your workflow, etc., etc., and it's got some mechanics in there as well. Yeah. So we organize ourselves into a social system, and it's the most highly complex system known to man. So now I'm going to bring in this this graph here. This graph here is the servitization chart, right? And it looks at how we position services. So we've got two axes here. We've got variety and volume, okay? We've got low and high variety and low and high volume. So when we've got tailored services, just like a nice bespoke suit, they're produced at low volume, but it's got high variety. You can get whatever you want. You walk into the shop and you can design it. Kind of like buying a Bentley car as well. You can go in and they'll design that car around you. However, Henry Ford, you got what you were given. In fact, Henry Ford actually said, and you might know this as well, you can have a car any color you want as long as it's black, okay? And that was because he was going for the opposite end. He was at high volume but low variety. He made one model of car and it was always black, but he made 1 million of them a year. So where are we in terms of KYC, CDD, fin crime, etc.? We don't sit on that epistemological extreme. We sit at both high variety and high volume. And then therefore that breaks every philosophical concept of production management and management paradigms. The reason why we develop organizations and organizations sometimes fail is because we're trying to fit what is a high variety and a high volume organization into a production line methodology, and it doesn't fit, but we keep trying and we keep developing IT systems to do that, and we make it fit, but it doesn't work at high performance. So we need to shift the paradigm. And to do that, right, as I've written here, worldviews don't die, they decline slowly. And if we are to produce high performance organizations, then we require strong leadership and direction and an understanding of what drives high performance. So systems theory, this is the digital age. If we are to understand a high performance system and develop a high performance system, we're going to need to know what one is. So what is a system? And I'm not talking about IT, I'm talking about that social system that sits at the very top of the epistemological extreme. A structured arrangement of two or more parts engaged in complex interactions with its environment. So what are the essential properties then? None of the parts have an independent effect on the whole, and how any part affects the whole depends on what other parts are doing. Yeah, the parts are connected via indirect or direct paths or feedback loops, and I'll cover more on that later. And the parts can be subgrouped into, no matter how they're arranged, their effect on the whole is still the same. Okay. So how does a system function? Keep an eye on this graph here, or this chart here in the bottom right hand corner. So a system exists within an environment greater than itself. Our organizations that we work for exist in a banking environment, and the banking environment sits in a super system called the market environment, and then that sits into a meso system, which is the world, and how those interactions, how that environment pushes down on our organization and how we respond to it is the fight against survival for our organization. And that's why we talk about organizational resilience. How resilient can we respond to changes in that environment? And a highly adaptive system and a highly complex system as well should have the capabilities to deal with that pressure being pushed down on it. So what are the implications of a systems approach to performance management? Any attempt to improve the performance of that system, yeah, or even the parts of the system, affects the whole. And if you are just changing a part of the system, like let's just say you're trying to improve KYC and the overall onboarding process, then you may not increase the performance of the onboarding process. And in fact, the disruption caused by trying to improve but an element of it may affect the performance of the whole, and does, and I know this, and I'll give you some examples of this as we move forward. So it's important then we look at the synchronization of all of the elements within a system to make sure they're functioning to the intended goal of the system. So what is feedback? Information that describes the behavior of a system. And what are the loops? The mechanisms through which a system regulates its behavior and its performance objectives. I'm going to pull this chart back in here. I'm going to have a look at some of these mechanisms. So feedback loops. You guys all know what these are. You probably have them in your organization just now. Feedback comes from an output of a process. We produce a product or service. If it's onboarding and it takes 90 days and we say, oh God, we should have done that in 50 days, we take a feedback from the 90 and find out what went wrong, and we try and learn from it. But if we increase the feedback loops to preliminary diagnostics, so when we're in flight and we're doing onboarding, if we've got faster and smaller feedback loops, we've got better adaptability and a better resilience. So then we can have in-action steps as well. So when we're producing the product or service, we can be looking at information, feedback loops back to the very person or function that is taking the operation, and then we can get the ability to reorientate, speed up, slow down, have more due diligence, have less. It's all at our disposal, but we need those mechanisms within inside the system. And then if you look at, yes,
just let you know we've only got a couple minutes left, so see if you can move through the rest of the slides. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to look at the fundamental principle, which is the velocity of feedback. Okay. You can have feedback loops in, but if they're slow, they will affect the performance of the system. They need to be instantaneous, and as we emerge into the digital environment, we can speed up a lot of that information transfer. So if you're putting resources and funding into your IT estate, put them into feedback loops and give that feedback directly to the people who are involved in the process. And then feed-forward loops. Feed-forward loops is the one that gives us the learning, planning, and improvement. So that's the information necessary to make strategic planning decisions that will help us go to high performance. And I just want to usher this in here just now, a couple of health checks for you guys, okay? Does your organization have deliberately designed feedback loops? If not, why not? Does everyone within the organization know and understand those feedback loops? And if not, why not? And is the model utilized to drive performance? If not, why not? And are your performance measures of the system aligned to the goal? Yeah, because if they're not, what are you improving? If you try to improve just functional responsibilities, you're just going to make a fast and efficient function, but the system is wider than that. And like I said earlier, every part is interconnected and affects the property of the whole. Sometimes functional performance does not give you system performance. So I want to create a CDD example, and David, I'm probably going to need a couple of more minutes, but let's see how we go here. So an example of CDD, we've got a 6-step process here, okay? And let me just show you how measures affect behavior. So we've got 6 functions here. Let's call it CDD, yeah? So we're doing the client due diligence here. If we've got 6 stages and each of those functions are operating at 95%, what is the efficiency of that process? Yeah. Some people may say it's 95% because if every function operates at 95%, then so will the system's whole. That's not true. It's actually 74%. There's a multiplicity involved here, and it's not adding them all up and dividing them by 6. Like I said, it's a multiplicity here. So I'm going to give you some empirical examples here of a banking organization. This is their performance of each of these 6 stages. What is the end-to-end performance of that system? Yeah, you'd be surprised. 22% efficient. And if you've got any measures within your functions that look like these across here, your ultimate system efficiency is only 22%. And now you start to understand why poor measures drive poor behavior. And if your feedback loops are not feeding back the right information and quickly enough, you end up with poor performance of the system overall. So I'm just going to give you a couple of the examples of how systems fail in this respect. Division of work and resources into functional tasks limits or prevents the understanding of the functional interactions and the dependencies. Every function needs to understand what the left hand's doing and the right hand's doing all the way through the system, such that we can continue to provide that product and service at high performance. Objectivizing measurement and metrics, of functional tasks will drive dysfunctional behavior, and the social interaction will decay. Services are all built on social interactions. Inadequate feedback loops and feed-forward loops prevents system participants from understanding their connective influence and performance. Yeah, it's not just about the IT system. Like I said earlier, a social system, that's what we operate in, and therefore we can't just say performance is built on IT, it's built on social interactions. So performance improvement of subsystem functions will fail to optimize the system performance of the whole, and will likely deteriorate if we do that. It's the second time I've mentioned that. And then the ability to adapt to feedback, the tactical change, and the feed forward, the strategic change, erodes the effectiveness of the model, i.e. the morale. So if you don't have feedback loops in, then your functional employees operating in silos will not know that their impact it is on the whole, and that does affect. If you build a system that gives the feedback loops of the function and of the whole system performance and how they interact with it, you'll get better performance, better behavior. So the hierarchy of data to wisdom. We'll talk about data and information and AI and machine learning and all of this stuff that a lot of us don't really get, but we want because everyone tells us it gives us high performance. I'm going to show you a distinction here.
And let's try to wrap this up in the next moment because we're running into the next presentation.
Okay, sorry. Right. So a pound of information. Yeah. So an ounce of information is worth a pound of data. And then an ounce of knowledge requires a pound of information to be transferred. And then an ounce of understanding requires a pound of knowledge. And to get to an ounce of wisdom requires a pound of understanding. So if we look at that hierarchy, we require a lot of data to get all the way up to wisdom and to get even just a small part of wisdom. But there is a hiatus here. Analysis is reductionism. It doesn't give us the ability to understand the performance of the whole. But what is it we need to understand the performance of the whole? We need something called synchronization or synthesis, which is an intensify the approach to make sure that we've got all the information and all of the knowledge and all of the collective wisdom that we can make good judgments on the overall system performance. So we need to think bigger picture and not just functionally here, okay? So I'm just going to speed these two things in. You can read there what I'm putting up. I'm going to make my point here. There's a hiatus of analysis, big data, machine learning, blah, 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 are all mechanistic paradigms of Fordism, of Taylorism, and they have got practical utility, but they're not for a complex adaptive system that we operate in today. Therefore, if you start to understand the connection here is that if they do not produce that, then we do not or cannot achieve the wisdom we need to create a high performance organization. And therefore, we must then prioritize a system design that gets us towards wisdom. I'm going to bring all these in because we're struggling here for time. I'm just going to say that when I was at HSBC, they were the first bank to be hit with a massive fine, nearly 2 billion in fines for poor client due diligence and poor KYC. And they were told by the Fed that they had to remediate every client in their portfolio, and they were to do that within 3 years. And how were we going to do that? Oh, plus they had to change policy as well. But that represented a massive opportunity. We were then able to design an organizational system to deal with the complexities of policy, a change in an environment, an upscaling of CDD, and then look at how we could weave all that together. So what we started off with here in the bottom left-hand corner was a remediation case took 182 days, an onboarding case took 57 days. But through taking a systems approach to it and understanding the interconnectivity of each of those processes taken as a whole and not of a part, we're able to make policy work for production, to make production work for policy, and very many other aspects. But we were able to improve the system performance. And if you look here to improvement, we got a remediation case down to 90 days. And we also got an onboarding case down to 19 days. And what that was enabled us to do was to go through that whole portfolio of 157,000 clients, remediate them, do exits as well, 30,000 exits, and again, deliver a robust policy in which we had a global standard, and we're the first bank in the world to have a global CDD standard. So just to recap, I'm just going to be a minute here, Dave. So we need to be aware of the limitations and the practical utility of mechanistic management principles. And then we've got complexity and environmental interactions of a system is where fine crime sits, which represents an extreme epistemological view of production and operations. So we need to identify the defining characteristics of a system and those interactions. We have done that, and the leverages that it has on a high performance organization. We need to understand the importance of feedback loops and have feedback loops all over the system and not just at the product outcome. The correct measures and metrics. We've seen how a poor STP example says you're 95% efficient, but you're not. And actually, we could be as poor as 22% efficient with the right measures and the right metrics. We've examined the necessary behaviors of change and cultural impact. Okay. And we've set in context the data to wisdom hierarchy, yeah, and how analysis doesn't provide all the answers. It is good, but we need synthesis if we're to produce a high performance organization. And then we've explored the use case, which I showed you there about HSBC and the challenge they had, and how we were only able to produce that high performance organization by rethinking methods of production. And that is me.